Good evening. How's everybody?
Good. How are you?
Hey, Jackie. There's Kim. I was just about late trying to answer Kim's email. I know y'all would hate that. That'd be terrible. All right. Okay. Okay. Make sure I had the weekly schedule up and going. Jackie, I'm gonna call on you tonight. I
Okay.
liked your answer on your discussion board. Um, I'd like for you to uh, talk about what you and your principal talked about. I thought that was a really good conversation. Um, and so um, that conversation that you had with her, we'll do that tonight. Kim, I just answered your email, and I'll go ahead and reiterate that for anybody that's joining us. I don't know if anybody else is, what time is it? Well, it's about time to get started. We'll go ahead and get started. See, I'm recording here. Folks come, they're all trying to get on here. So Kim asked a very, very good question. And I'm glad she did because I needed to be reminded. I usually do it a little bit later in the semester, but that's okay. So Kim asked, when does summer school start? How many hours do you have to get for your summer internship and about classes this summer? Those are all excellent questions. And so generally around the 1st of March, we do it kind of as a surprise gift, but I'll go ahead and let the cat out of the bag. If you get your 80 hours done, you can start counting summer hours by May the 1st. That'll give you about 2.5 extra weeks, and it'll be during a time when you can generate a lot of hours. The problem with getting summer hours is, once the school building closes, middle of June, for the next 6 weeks of summer school, it's hard to get out. Now, one of the things that I normally do is I recommend that you spend a week or two with your administrators during the summer when they're doing scheduling. If you can do a couple of weeks of that, 4 or 5 hours a day, that really, really helps you. But I know many of you have other obligations, summer school, summer jobs. So if you know that you can't go and volunteer at your school for a couple of hours, a couple of weeks during the summer, you need to be planning ahead on getting your hours. Now, summer school runs from May 17th to the last Friday. Derek says the principal's putting him to work. That's great. That's great. So May 17th to the last Friday in July, which is July 28th. That's the 10 weeks of summer school. And as you know, that first 4 weeks is when school's still in session. But after that, oh, excellent. Michelle's doing the master schedule. That's what I'm talking about. The master schedule gets finalized in the summer. If you can be there for that, you'll learn so much more than anything I can teach. I can tell you that. So that's if you can get, if that's the point of the summer, is if you can come during that master scheduling time, that's great. But you're going to need um, 80 hours this summer. It's hard to get in that short period of time. So we will let you start 2.5 weeks early if you get your 80 knocked out this spring, which is easy to get them this spring. You get it knocked out, we'll let you start counting them on May the 1st. I can't let you count them before then. But they won't, that 3-month period, they won't kick if it's May the 1st. By state definition in North and South Carolina, you have to be a full-time intern. That means you can't get 160 hours one semester and take a semester off from your clinical. It's got to go all the way through for at least what works out to be what they call a year is actually 11 months and 1 week is what they consider a year. And you have to be consistent. You got to have hours every day or two during that period of time. Otherwise, they won't count you as a full-time intern. And then you got to have to do an internship with your central office outside of what we do if that were to occur. Now, Kim also asked a very good question. We just have 10 weeks. Yeah, you can visit other schools, shadow. If you're in South Carolina, you might want to try to get your hours at a different grade level so that you can get both the elementary and secondary licensure. You know, South Carolina licensure has been split into elementary and secondary. So like if you're in the middle school, it'd be easier to do the elementary, and it would be easy if you're high school to go down and do the middle. You want to do the feeder level if you can, and then I'll recommend you for both. Let me show you that form in just 1 minute, by the way. I want to go over that form with you from South Carolina people. But summer classes, you meet once a week just like you do now. However, you know I'm long-winded. So my classes, Dr. Sain and I, how long did it take us this summer? We went 2 hours most nights, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's unfortunate, but we got to cover the same amount of material in 10 weeks as opposed to 8. Some nights we got out at an hour and a half. It probably balanced out. It wasn't many nights. I said some. I should have said a few. It probably balanced out about the same as the hour for the regular, but some nights we went a little longer. And you know that, always on case study nights, we plan on 2 hours for those. Yeah. So yeah, you're going to go a little longer, but you don't have to meet but one night a week. And what we did, and what we do, no, you won't have me for your summer class. You'll have Dr. Stone or Dr. Sanders, probably Dr. Stone. Now, one of the things that we do in the summer to help you is we start an hour earlier. We start at 6 rather than 7, so that we're still through by 8. I don't like to keep people past 8 o'clock. I know you have responsibilities, school night, different things going on. So what we do is we start an hour earlier in the summer and we go 6 to 8 rather than 7 to 9. So that helps too. And Dr. Stone does that. And you'll love him. He's just the kindest man. Yeah, the 28th is the last day. That what your license will say is the 28th. And that's also, I think, what your diploma will say. Now, let me remind you, you folks will be finishing this summer. We do not have a commencement exercise of any kind. They have put the fatwa on that. We've been disallowed. We can't even get you together. We can't. Now, what Dr. Stone will do, and I will join him, is he'll put together for your last class a retrospective where you will send in pictures of you and your family and those kinds of things, and we'll do a video retrospective, kind of we can't call it a graduation exercise, but y'all will finish officially on July 28th, and that's what your licensure date will say, and that's what your diploma will say. And then you will, in the next 2 weeks, when you get your official transcript, you apply for your licensure. It'll say July 28th. You will graduate that day. We will not have a commencement ceremony for the university or even for the College of Ed. We did that one time and they banned that as well. So what will happen is you will be invited to the December ceremony. Now, the good thing about the December ceremony, as opposed to the May ceremony, is it's a one-day deal. There's 2 ceremonies in one day rather than a Thursday night, Friday, like we're doing this spring, or normally we do Friday night, Saturday, but we're doing Thursday night, Friday. So the university one is at 9 a.m. in the morning. You show up at 8, go to Dover, or you go to, well, we've been going to Boss Gym and lining up. And then you folks, the doctorals line up in Boss Gym. You folks go to Dover Theater, which is in the same building as the basketball arena. There's just a breezeway connecting them. And so the second Saturday in December will be the date, whatever date that is. And so, and the good thing is it's always raining. So y'all won't get wet except getting in there. So the 9th of December will be your date. And you will process in at the 9 o'clock ceremony. You will be recognized from your seat, and then you will process out. The doctorals get up and go across the stage. We have to be with them. We take our doctorals up. And we hood them and do all that. And then, now this past December, we had to wait 2 hours in between, or 2.5. We didn't get to go back again until 1 o'clock. Hopefully we'll get to do the one where we just march out and come right back in, the 11 o'clock. But we had to wait till 1, and so we went over to Rich Banquet Hall and had lunch. They had Swedish meatballs, chicken wings, and pizza. Breakfast of champions. But anyway, we had that. But we'll do something in between. But yeah, your day will be December the 9th. You'll do it all in one day. Hopefully it won't be as long as the one this, we won't have that big gap in between, but I can't promise that. But now at the second ceremony, we process back into the same basketball arena. Now this time you get to come up, have your name called across the stage, and I will put the hood on you. Dr. Bull will be with me. They'll call your name. You'll get your picture made. So unfortunately, only doctorals get to cross the stage. At the Gardner Webb one, but you will get to cross the stage at the College of Ed one. Have your name called, and you'll have to have your regalia. We'll tell you how to order that. I think it's like what is it? Don't quote me, $175, but you have to have a cap and a gown, and you have to have a hood. I think it's like $175. It may be a little cheaper than that, between $150 and $175 for your regalia. And you have to have that to come across the stage. So that's kind of the game plan. Be thinking about your hours, as Kim said. Think about it. Think about that. And so, what did Christina have to say? I missed that one.
Lexington 1 has decided that you have to be
You're
done.
muted, Christina.
Can you hear me now? No? Yes? Okay. Lexington 1 has
I
decided.
still can't hear her.
Can y'all
Is
hear
it
me?
just me?
I think it's just you, Dr. Lamb.
Is anybody, is my speaker working? Is that the problem? It's just me. All right. So let me go to my audio here. Okay. Let me see if there's a problem with mine. No, it says my speakers are at 100%, but I can't hear y'all. All right. We can hear you fine. Okay. So Dr. Same, can
you hear me?
talk? I can't hear you either. I don't know why. Let me see. Let me go to my audio settings. Okay. All right, now somebody talk.
Can you hear?
I can now.
Perfect.
Just fix my audio. It's amazing. Technology.
Dr. Lamb. So Lexington 1 has decided that you have to be done by July 1st in order to apply for a job in the next school year.
You have to be done
by July 1st to apply for a job in the next school year.
All right. So what I did last summer. Now I don't know if they'll let me do it, if they'll honor it. So what I would do is you get in there and you work hard during summer school, and I write you a letter that says that you're complete and you're just waiting to get your diploma on the 28th. That's what I did last summer, and they honored it. They let people interview. So it's, this is one of the only times it's good to be old and be the oldest rat in the barn. You know stuff. So let me share with you, and I hadn't planned on this, so I need to let me share my screen. But
Christina, you're in South Carolina, right? That's South Carolina. Yeah. Well, if they don't want you, there's plenty of schools in North Carolina that would take you in a heartbeat. So come on across the state line.
But we'll try our best. Yeah, we'll get you one on the north side. But I'll write you that. I'll show you. I've got some example letters that I've did last summer, because yeah, I had some other folks that did that as well. Now whether they'll honor that, I don't know, but we'll try it. It can't hurt to try.
I like that recruitment style though, Dr. Singh.
So let me look right quick, and I want to make sure that everybody understands this piece before summer rolls around. So here's one. Pop on up here. So now this is only for you South Carolina people. Now don't let me remind, and I highlighted this one so we can see it. I had this one. So what they've done now in South Carolina, they have split administration license, the principal licensure in elementary and secondary. Now, North Carolina people, don't panic. They did not do this in North Carolina. It's K-12 in North Carolina. Now, so I had to put what grade span right here, 6-8, so she could only get secondary. Now, this summer, if you intern for one term at another school, that's, if you're in middle, you're going to get secondary. But if you want to get elementary, just do your intern in an elementary this summer. High school, if you want elementary, then you'll have to go to an elementary, and vice versa. Now, if you're elementary, just go up to the middle and you can get secondary. But it's not only good training and good experience, it will give you the opportunity here to try to get both of these, because you never know, especially middle school people, you could go up or down. There's a lot of that going on. And so just make sure that you understand that that I'm going to have to recommend you for one or the other. But if you have an internship signed 80 hours from that other, I will recommend you for both. And they normally don't kick on that. They've been good about granting that. Now, if you say, well, I'll just come back and do that later, you're going to have to go through your district for that. And that's they'll probably make you do a whole year there. I hate that, but so if you're thinking ahead, if you can work it out, that would be a really good thing to do if you could. But yeah, we want you to be as employable as possible and work where you want to as much as possible. That would be the thing. All right, I don't want to keep on, but yeah, these are good things to know. Anybody else have anything that I missed in the chat? Questions that you had? Again, I believe you'll have Dr. Stone this summer. I believe that's who I've got y'all slated to be with. And so you will like him. He is the kindest person in the world. He's a marvelous, marvelous person. You'll enjoy it. All right, so let's talk about our weekly assignments. They're great. I have no complaints. What I do want to do is, things catch my eyes, they come in. And so we've been talking about school discipline. We've been talking about due process. I want to remind you, and Dr. Sain's going to cover this really well in a couple of weeks. Due process is not only for discipline, it's also for exceptional children. I got a question this week. It came in from my C2 group from Whitney. She said, what happens if you don't have an EC teacher? That's just too bad, so sad. That does not negate that you have to follow through with that contract, that IEP contract with that child and that child's parents. That is due process. That you don't have a licensed teacher, that doesn't change due process, folks. You can't go to court and say, well, we didn't do due process, but we didn't have a teacher. Well, that won't work in court. So I know that EC teachers are short, but that contract is that substantive due process. What are they supposed to get? And then how you carried it out is that procedural. Did they get it? And that there nowhere in there does it say, that you don't have to follow substantive due process, deliver due process simply because, you don't have a teacher, right? That's not the way that works. And Dr. Sain will talk about that more. And also, when we talk about EC and FERPA, it's not just EC kids we can't be talking about, it's all kids. We've already mentioned that. Just when you're doing discipline, the parents want to know. No, you can't talk to them about the other people's kids. I had Allison was talking about a conversation with her principal, you know, that they'll go to social media and beat you up on social media, but you can't fall for the bait, folks. You can't respond back on social media telling your side of the story, because if you do, you will violate state personnel laws, or you'll violate FERPA standards for students. As we were pointing out, that principal that wanted to give her side of the story, she admitted to several law violations last week. That wasn't smart. She also, you know, gave away some personal information. So you can't be doing that. We also talked last week about the unfortunate child that was bullied in school, and the video got out of her getting assaulted. She killed herself, and then the superintendent made unwarranted FERPA violation comments. He was fired the next day, and that ain't going to be the end of it. He's going to be in court for the rest of his life. Not smart. So make sure you understand. Carl talked about share little. Carl had a good notion on that one. I don't know if Carl's with us tonight or not, but Carl said share very little with teachers. It's not that we're trying to keep teachers in the dark. We're trying to protect ourselves and protect them as well. You can't be doing that. Carl's in the other group, sorry. Some other points that came up along the way that I want to remind you of. Again, there is no such thing as being expelled from school. You can be excluded for up to 365 days after a due process hearing and a hearing before the Board of Education. That's the maximum, but you can always apply to come back after 365. So the notion that a kid was expelled, there is no expulsion. Even if you bring a gun to school, there is no expulsion. Public school, there's only exclusion for up to 365 days. That's the maximum. Can't give more than that. Now, thinking about private schools, Catholic schools, Michelle's with us. Thinking about now charter schools or public schools, so the law is the same for them. One of the things that I was asked is if a kid gets excluded from, say, Lincoln County schools, can he go over to Gaston County and go to school during that time? No, not at a public or charter school. Can go to a private school if they'll take him. But the exclusion goes from district to district. Now in South Carolina, it's the same way. You can't go from Lexington 1 to Lexington 2 if you get excluded. You could go to a private school, you know, but you can't go to another public school. So that's one of the things to remember. I'm going through my list here. You know, mistakes in due process. Naima brought that one up. Yeah. You know, if you do that, you got to fix it. I mean, that's the thing to remember. Sometimes mistakes occur, but just saying my bad, we'll do better next time. No, you have to go back, and if you make a mistake in due process, you have to go back and fix it. You can't just say I'll do better next time. And so Jackie, we're going to get to Jackie's social media and FERPA. All right, so now here's a case of something that happened. To get it from one day, can you go to another state? Usually, I've had that happen when I was in charge of things in CMS, and we'd get, you know, kids would kind of go across the line to South Carolina to a public school, and we would send the permanent records, and they wouldn't take them. Generally, public schools, if you're excluded in one state, they won't allow you to do that in another. That's pretty much an agreement between schools. It generally won't work. One of the things that came up that Mallory in my other section talked about was an incident in her school where a teacher was providing inadequate supervision. A little boy was building blocks, I guess, in a play area or a playground or something. And a little girl went over and kicked his blocks over. And some bullying occurred, some bullying comments and behavior from the girl and from her friends toward the little boy. Well, the little boy got up and grabbed her and shook her. Well, the teacher came over and you know, stopped the little boy and they got him under control. But the teacher immediately went and called the parent and basically said, you know, it was all the boy's fault, your child, you know, and before an investigation was fixed. And so then the principal, after the investigation, they found out that it wasn't a situation where he just was bullying her. They were bullying him and had provoked him into this, and that the teacher wasn't providing adequate supervision. But the teacher ran and got her licks in first to make herself look like the good guy. Nothing to see here. I'm the good guy. And then the principal had to come along and say, that's not how it happened. In a situation like that, one of the things that I want to make sure that you understand is when you process discipline, and you must have a protocol on how due process is going to be carried out. And you shouldn't be telling anybody anything. And you should tell your teachers, don't be telling anybody anything until we've concluded our investigation. And that's kind of my last part on due process and discipline is be thorough in your investigation. It takes time and patience. It's aggravating getting statements. But if you don't, this is the kinds of things that happen. And you've got to caution your teachers. Don't you be running and talking out of school until we've done this investigation. Now, the teacher had, you know, this was prurient self-interest. She was trying to get ahead of an inadequate supervision charge on her part. But that's the kind of stuff that happens. But she stepped outside of due process and made a judgment before an investigation was even launched as to what had happened. Those are the things you have to fix, and you're going to be the bad guy, and parents are not going to like it, and they're going to beat you up on social media and why. Well, that's why you're supposed to get, you know, have thick skin. You can't fall for the bait. You can't get in Twitter wars. You can't get into a Facebook scrap. You got to let it go. Dr. Slane, I'm gonna turn it over to you and let you give comments and then kick into your tonight's presentation. I've taken too much of your time already.
No, you're fine. That's what you just said. It's funny. 2 days ago, I had a conversation with the principal that I'm still supporting, and I made that the principal's getting ready to go in front of a group of parents who've called a meeting with her and the superintendent, and that was my advice. You sit there, you listen, and you don't say anything. Do not argue. Do not say that it's untrue. Just sit there and listen, and then when they leave, then you can plan. We can plan how we'll respond, because as principals, there, you know, we have to take. You're gonna develop some very thick skin. You're gonna be the bad guy, but anytime you start arguing back with parents or groups of parents that create a coalition, it's only going to make the road more complicated for you. And a lot of people push back and say, well, I need to defend myself. Well, there are going to be many avenues where you can defend yourself, just not in front of that group of parents who are probably already upset with you because they're having to call a meeting in the first place. That doesn't sound like good advice. Maybe you think that I'm telling you to be weak, but what I'm telling you is that's going to help you in the long run. And Dr. Lamb, you may agree or disagree with that, but I've only had even more complicated issues when principals start to argue or when they try to defend themselves, because parents take that as arguing, even though you have great points, valid points. It's just not best. So, but let's transition to some issues that are even more fun, and they're going to make you beat your head against your desk daily, and that's specifically technology, and then how that leads to cyberbullying. I'm
sorry, I'm so sorry. Before we jump into that, I told Jackie. I'm sorry, Jackie. You need to be more vocal. Jackie, I want you to talk about the conversation, which leads to it kind of concludes the conversation we just had. And that's where I was headed with that. Jackie, talk about the conversation you just had with your principal.
I was hoping you forgot about me.
No.
So, well, the gist of what the conversation with my principal was, and I really appreciate you bringing this prompt up. And the way that it was phrased about what concerns do you have, because it allowed us to have a really vulnerable conversation about this, in which she said she has to consistently remind herself to check her bias, basically, because not bias necessarily against a gender or a race or anything like that, but just bias against the child's previous actions. Or even the quote she says is, it doesn't matter how much they've irked my nerves in the past.
Yeah.
I have to just focus on this situation. So I don't know if that's the conversation you want me to.
It's exactly it. See, that's what I'm talking about. And that's what Dr. Saint's talking about. Kids will, and parents will have provoked you, and your bias will come up, especially in those parent meetings, and it won't go well for you. You've got to check that bias at the door. You know, this parent's over here, this holier than thou, ranting against you, and their kid's the worst kid in the building. That's what we're talking about. You have to swallow it, folks. I'm telling you, it's hard. Now, you know me. I don't get stressed. I'm a carrier. People that are around me get stressed, but even I had to learn that you got to check yourself before you wreck yourself. And you have to do that with kids, and you have to do it with parents. And the reason for the parents is because of what their kids have done. They're not calling a meeting because their kids are wonderful and everything is good. They're mad about something that you've made their kids not do, or that some action you've taken against them. And that's kind of the conclusion of this argument is you're biased whether you know it or not. And when those parents start, you're thinking about what their kid did the day before that cost you an hour, some foolishness, and that will come out of you the best that you can do. Just take notes. Just learn to take notes in meetings like that, because like Jackie said, you've got to control your bias. That was the piece of it, not only with kids but with parents as well. And that kind of concludes that. So again, 1,000 pardons, Dr. Sain, for interrupting you, but that's such a great point. That's such a good way to phrase that.
I had a sticky note on my desk that I looked at every morning, and it said, it's a new day and everybody gets a new start. And that includes teachers and students. And it just kind of focused, but trust me, I had to remind myself of that probably about 15 times a day. And not have bias about a kid who I saw, the last 3 weeks in my office. Again, it was a new consequence, and we had to start fresh. So let's talk a little bit. I'm going to share my screen here. Can everybody good on that? Can y'all see that? All right.
Yes.
So let's talk about technology and social media. And I'm kind of nervously laughing because, like I said, this is one of these things where we as principals, it feels like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Pardon my language there, but it's just one of those things where bullying, cyberbullying, what we have to do as administrators seems impossible. But at the end of the day, the expectation for us is almost impossible, but we still have to do it. And so tonight's kind of lesson here is there's a lot of information I'm going to throw at you. I'll get Dr. Lamb to put these slides on Blackboard, or I think I can put them on there just so you'll have them. But again, we'll go through this. I'm going to start with bullying, just in general, just for us to go over it. I know you all know what bullying is, but I really want you to see how bullying ties specifically to cyberbullying, and how cyberbullying is also a little bit different than just bullying. So through DPI, the legal definition of bullying is spoken words intended to intimidate or harass a person or their property. But that word, which is talking about parents are going to start throwing, as soon as you become an administrator, that's probably the first thing you're going to deal with. My kid's being bullied. And the first thing that you'll have to do as an administrator is decipher whether it is in fact bullying or not. Or a teacher is going to come to you and say, I think there's bullying going on. And these two things right here, an imbalance of power. What's the motive of the student? Are they using their power to kind of control or harm others? Or is that behavior repeated? Is there repetition in that behavior? And if you can answer yes to either one of those, then it is bullying. Now, and there's going to be some cases where it doesn't seem like it's a significant amount of bullying, but hear me now. We are not here to rate how significant the bullying is. We are just, the law is very clear. We must investigate, and we must provide measures to keep kids safe, regardless of how little or how insufficient the bullying is. So there our three main types of bullying, and in a post cell phone world, or a pre cell phone world, excuse me, and computers and technology and the internet, verbal bullying, social bullying, and physical bullying were the three main times. I'm not going to read over those three for you, but again, that is specifically stated in the North Carolina general statute, that bullying or harassing behavior is written, electronic, verbal, or physical. Okay, and so I have underlined and highlighted electronic there, because that's what we're really going to focus on tonight. But again, I really want you to focus on, I tried to highlight because these slides are so wordy, I want you to focus in on D and E down there. A school employee who has witnessed or has reliable information that a student or school employee has been subject to any act of bullying or harassing behavior shall report the incident to the appropriate school official. And that should be immediately, not in a day, not if it's a Friday afternoon at 2:50. It must be reported to you immediately. And then either a student or volunteer who has witnessed or has reliable information should report that incident as well. And that is so important that we teach students to do that. And so we're going to talk about when you should have this conversation for kids, but it is your responsibility as an administrator to ensure that your staff understands that they must report bullying to you or to a designee. And we're going to talk about that term, a designee. If you're running a school or you're an assistant principal or principal, I tell my principals, you need to be the designee, especially when we're dealing with bullying. Now, you may have a dean of students. You may have, when you become a principal, you may have assistant principals that you trust. But I would keep that circle of who deals with bullying, harassing, cyberbullying very close. Dr. Lamb, you have any thought? You were at a much bigger district than I am, so that might not be possible. But I always like to keep that circle very, very tight.
I think I think it needs to go straight to the principal, because the principal, regardless of, because the law as written in that disciplinary data manual, which is our Bible, and it says, regardless of who reports it, or enters the disciplinary data in, or collects it, or collates it, or processes it, the principal is ultimately responsible for the accuracy of incident reporting. And I would be afraid on that disciplinary data, because of that one, which is a class 4 misdemeanor, which means you lose your license in your house, and you have a lot of tort liability. I would not designate anybody other than the principal to be that responsible person. I think it's just way too important.
And a lot of times as a principal, and when I was a principal, I did deal with all the bullying and harassing, and then I used my assistant principals to help me investigate.
Yes.
I was the point person on those, on all the bullying. But I know that some of my colleagues, they kind of had the reverse. They were notified after the fact. So I just, like Dr. Lamb just said, it's too big of a deal. It's too close to you being in court defending your behavior as opposed to supporting the safety of children. So I always made myself the point person there. So this is again, going just the second slide of the general statute, but I highlighted number 6 there, that there must be a procedure for prompt investigation of reports of serious violations or complaints of any acts of harassment. And I pointed this out because I had a principal kind of push back. I did a presentation similar to this with every school year with my principals. And the principal pushed back and said, well, what I think is serious, you might not think of serious. And my response back was, well, that's why we investigate it all. We are not in the business of interpreting this law to what the specific word means. But I guarantee you that a judge, if you go to a judge and you have to go to court and you say, well, I didn't think it was serious enough, a judge is going to laugh at you in the face and say, well, that's even more of a reason why you probably shouldn't be a leader of a school. So again, all violations all accusations or investigations of harassing and bullying are serious. Simple as that. Because in today's world, and I think we touched on it last week, we're dealing with an increased level of students who are taking their lives because of this. So it's becoming, not that it never was important, but good God, now we've got kids killing themselves over it. So every act is serious.
And I want to chime in there. Pardon my interruption.
Oh gosh.
When you go to court, one of the hardest things to prove or to defend yourself against is intent. When you say, well, I don't think he meant to do this, or I don't think he meant to, or she meant to do that, you're adjudicating intent. That doesn't go well in court. When you get up and say, I didn't think it was serious, I don't think he intended to do this, or oh no. Court's about what did they do, not intent. You can't, don't be going to court trying to argue intent. That will not go well for you. And your attorney will tell you that right away. Oh, I can't do that. That's just admitting guilt there. That's just, you might as well just plead guilty and go on about your business if you're going to go to court and try to talk about intent. Do not do that, whatever you do. So you gotta investigate it all. There is no major, there is no minor. There is, well, I didn't think his intent was this, or he didn't mean that. Oh no. Oh no. That will not stand you in good stead in court. That will not go well at all. I have the scars from that one.
Yep. And so just moving along here, just for the sake of time, at the beginning of every year, this should be reviewed with your staff. So when you become a leader of a school, this is going to be on that beginning of the year, that initial staff meeting. And really, I've always encouraged my principals to do this every quarter. This always we need to remind everyone about our bullying and our harassment policies, because it is required in this general statute that we deliver to all of our students, our staff, and our parents about this policy. And so again, I use this presentation to train my principals so that then they could go back and then obviously train their staff. You'd be surprised at how many in your buildings do not know about these policies. You'd be surprised, about what a lot of policies we don't know. And primarily it's because school leaders are not talking to our staff members about these policies enough. So again, it has to be done at the beginning of the year at minimum. Oh, mercy. Not working here. All right. I included hazing in here just because I think it's important, especially at the secondary level, because hazing, just as serious, if not sometimes more serious than the harassment and bullying. They all are fit together. But again, if you've got sports, if you've got organized clubs, if you've got,
if you've got wrestling and band, you're going to have hazing.
Yes.
Yes, I said that.
It's true. And so you got to monitor it. And I don't want to seem like I'm preaching to you tonight, but just because you don't hear that it's happening doesn't mean that it's not happening. These are the things that we have to be proactive. We have to be asking questions, because if it's happening and you don't know about it, but it's happening on your watch, guess who's responsible? Okay, that's what I kind of said at the beginning. This stuff is going to make you want to beat your head against a desk. But that means you've got to have continual and frequent conversations with these club leaders, with these coaches, to make sure that it's not happening. Because if you just kind of go off of this idea that, I'm only going to act if I hear about it, or if I see something, that's not going to hold up well in court as well. If in fact it is happening, and you just say, well, I didn't know about it. That judges kind of look at that. I hope Dr. Lamb will agree and kind of laugh at you and say, well, that's not my problem. That sounds like yours. So, all right. So let's transition to this age of what's really kind of taking grasp of where you're going to spend a majority of your time as future leaders. And that is with cyberbullying. And why is that? It's because kids now have access to the entire world on their hip or in their hand all the time. So one of the things that scares me the most about cyberbullying is yes, those top three bolded there. That's what the biggest impacts of cyberbullying can be. But that one that I've highlighted there, that this can lead to suicide, and it is quickly becoming one of the #1 causes of teen suicide in this country. And if that doesn't motivate us to try and stop this, then I don't know what does. But what makes cyberbullying difficult and hard for us at the school level to manage is that the fact that a lot of it may not happen while we're in school. It may happen after school hours. But I'm going to show you some wording that we can't say that just because it doesn't happen, because it's not happening in our buildings or during the time of school, that we are not responsible for addressing it. And I'll show you some of that in just a second. You all know where cyberbullying occurs, and in an era where most of your schools are probably one-to-one with school-based technology. And so it can happen on laptops, textbooks. It can happen throughout the day. It happens after school. Social media, TikTok is just that's where it's very prevalent. Snapchat. Again, you guys are all familiar with it because your students probably all have cell phones in their hands, and you probably remind them that they shouldn't have them out frequently throughout the day. Sandra, you got a question?
Yes, I have a quick question. So for the monitoring of this, when you
Yes.
say even if it happens outside of school and it's
Mhm.
not happening during the school time,
Mhm.
I mean, do we have a designated team within our district that monitors social media? Should we reach out to the cyber security people with CMPD? I mean, how do we find out these things without actually going to the kid and saying, hey, you know, what's happening, how things going? I mean, how do we know that it's
Sandra,
happening?
this is kind of me. I want to make sure we stress this one.
Mhm.
And my answer when you do your cyberbullying announcement, one of the things I'm going to say is the device that's used is immaterial. Doesn't matter if it's not their phone or if it's not the school computer. Where it happened is immaterial. When it happened is immaterial. If it affects the learning environment of your school, the law says you have to deal with it. So if a kid comes to you, you don't have to go hunt it. That's not what we're talking about. See, right here, it's coming up. You don't have to go hunt it. But if a kid comes to you and said, last night on Snapchat, they were saying bad things about me, your response cannot be, well, that was last night, not my problem. That is not true. That if it negatively impacts the education environment, which means a kid comes and complains or comes and tells you, you by law must deal with it. I've had way too many administrators who would say, well, it's not my problem if it happened out of school, or they didn't use the school equipment to do that. That's just stupid. That's not what the law says. If the educational environment is impacted, then you better deal with it. Now, I'm going to tell you this, and we'll get to Jackie's question. 2 of my interns, mine, I don't take many anymore, but 2 of my interns, one at Albemarle High School, a kid walked up, he was getting his 80 hours. He was on morning supervision at the front door of Albemarle High School, standing there where the kids come in the door. A kid walked up and shot the kid dead, standing right next to him, and handed him the gun over a bullying situation, a cyberbullying situation that had occurred over the weekend. The last kid that was killed in Mecklenburg County at a school at Butler, same thing. Kid walked in the foyer, didn't say a word, and shot the kid dead that he'd been on social media with the night before. Those are extreme cases, but what we're talking about is if you don't think stuff that happens outside of school or or used on not school equipment matters, then you don't really understand the problem. You got to get involved with this stuff. If they bring it to school, you better deal with it.
So outside of them bringing it to us, we shouldn't have tried to police it or monitor it ourselves.
They'll bring it to you. When they bring it to you, when you find out, when a kid tells you that this is why they're not coming to school, or why their grades have slipped, or why they won't socialize, and all the things that list of things that Dr. Sane just put up there, the things that you notice about kids, all the bad things that bullying, when you see those things, and you talk to a kid, your counselors bring them in and they tell you, then you get involved. But no, you don't have to monitor. Your district in Charlotte, they are monitoring social media every day, especially faculty members. After that bunch of nitwits got on Facebook and said all those bad things and had to be fired a few years back about their own kids in their own rooms. So yes, social media is monitored very much in the bigger districts. You've got a cybersecurity team that monitors that. But we're talking about when kids bring you things and say, I'm being cyberbullied at home, I'm on social media away from school. Don't think that because it didn't happen in school or it didn't happen on school equipment, that you don't have to deal with it. You do, because it affects the educational environment. Jackie, you had a question?
Well, I was just gonna add, like, this is on their school devices. Our county uses Gaggle, which I think
Yeah.
a lot of counties use. And so anything that they type on their school device that hits one of those keywords, it sends it to the principal, the vice principals, and then all the county mental
Yeah.
health providers. And when and the kids, like when they have their phones taken, or when they can't use their phones in school, or when their parents take their phones at home, what's the first thing they do? They open up Google Chat or Google Doc and they start talking, and they think
Yeah.
they're real slick about it. And then they put it all out there and you can see everything. So that catches a lot of stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah, if they're using school equipment, they're being monitored, but most of them figure that out. So they use private stuff. So you can't just say, well, they didn't do it on school equipment. So yeah, but yeah, that school equipment's being monitored. So if that happens, if somebody from cybersecurity in your district will contact you on that, or they'll contact the principal immediately.
Mhm.
But if a kid brings it to you, you got to deal with it. That's the point that we're making here. If it's brought to you, don't find an excuse not to deal with it. And way too many principals find an excuse. They just make it up. Oh, that law was repealed. It was not. That law was not repealed. If it negatively impacts the educational environment, you got to deal with it. And that means if a kid brings it to you, that's a negative impact by definition when you go to court.
Yep.
So that's what we're explaining here is don't try to find ways to get out of it. And that's what a lot of administrators are trying to do now. They're trying to find ways to make excuses as to why they didn't deal with it, or don't want to, or don't want that to happen. That's not the right way to go. That's what I'm telling you. You need to go the other way.
I've dealt with a couple of cases this year alone where parents, so teachers who had kids at the ball field, right? Their own personal children, they're sitting there minding their own business, watching their kids play ball. Another parent comes up and says, hey, I know you work at this school. Look at this TikTok. Look at what's happening to the students in this, in that go to your school. What's being done about it. And we've had a couple of cases where those teachers did not come back and report that. And that is a big, that does not, that they must come back and report it. Now, then there should be an investigation to see if that is having an impact on the educational environment and if in fact it is happening. But again, you can't just sit there and say, well, I'm not on the clock, so I don't have to report. I think that conversation is it's so important to have with your staff members as well. Yes, Andrew.
So if I can share, this actually happened to me, and the former administration tried to convince me to let it go, just talk to the kid and just have them apologize to me. I did not.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a police report. I filed it. I was a little taken by the fact that, first of all, they brought it to me when it happened. And then they tried to convince me, oh, it was just kids being silly. Don't worry about it.
Again, that's what we're talking about, intent. How do they know what the intent was? That's a great one, Sandra. That's what
Because they threatened to shoot me in my head.
That's what I'm talking about.
During the height of
what their intent is.
Online teaching.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. You got to deal with stuff like that. I don't know what the kid's intent is. I don't know if they got a gun in their house or not. You better have a plan. Hope won't work in this case, folks. Hope is not a plan. You've heard me say that 1,000 times. Same way hope's not a plan, trying to figure out somebody else's intent's not a good idea, especially when somebody gets hurt. And then you're saying, well, I didn't think they were serious. Well, how'd you know? That's not a good thing. You got to deal with all these things. And I get it. People, to Sandra's point, people, because this is become such a big issue, and people are set in their ways, and they don't like change and don't like dealing with new things. Way too many administrators are trying to find excuses and ways to not be involved in this. And they're making stuff up. They're adjudicating intent when they have no ability to do that. They're telling you that the law has been repealed. That's not true. There was one article of the law that was repealed, and that simply said, if you're in a Twitter war with somebody and you start losing, you can't claim you were bullied. Other than that, the law is still on the books. He just showed it to you. That notion that, well, and then we have the ones that say, well, they didn't use a school device. That's immaterial. Or it didn't happen during school hours. That's immaterial as well. What we've got to do is we've got to train a generation of administrators that are looking for ways to solve and deal with the problem rather than ways to cover up and ignore the problem and find excuses not to deal with it. That's the whole notion. This is here to stay. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. I'm going to show you how smart I am.
Can I ask one more question before you do that? I'm actually dealing with something right now from a Hispanic student who's using the F word and just like flipping me off in the email, in the student email inbox. And I'm not exactly sure why or where it's coming from. Is that part of this conversation?
It absolutely is.
Okay. Because before, I've got to go down my roster and really figure out which one it is, because when I take attendance, this particular student isn't there. So I'm trying to figure out, is somebody using his information and doing it for him or what? So I'm kind of dealing with that right now.
Yeah, that needs to be dealt with. Absolutely. That needs to be pursued.
So just for the sake of time, I know we're closing down, but I do want to briefly touch base on acceptable use policies. And so I just dove right into the district that I am most familiar with, and that's Lincoln County here in North Carolina, just outside of Charlotte, if you're not familiar with it. So it's a medium-sized district, nowhere near the size of CMS, but still, we have these acceptable use policies because we are in a world where every kid has a cell phone, every kid has a one-on-one device. And so, these types of policies are there to support the statutes that we just talked about. So for example, in Lincoln County schools, for both students and staff, that technology is for instructional use only. Non-instructional use is strictly prohibited. So, and then we get into this discussion of cell phones. And can a school tell students that they can't have cell phones? Can we tell them to turn them off? And the answer to that is that it is up to your board. However, most of them have wording very similar to this. So for example, in Lincoln County, the board recognizes that cell phones are an important tool for parents to communicate. So students are permitted to possess those devices as long as they're not activated, used, or displayed during times of instruction. That's kind of and again, the wording, how we interpret that, our board started loosely interpreting that. And that's actually kind of backfired over the past couple of years. But it is written that technically students can have access to personal cell phone devices, but they should not be activated while they are in school. In the event that there is an emergency, they could then turn them on and communicate. So, and here's going back to Sandra, this is that part where it's specifically in the acceptable use policies for Lincoln County schools. This is the statement that really says we must be monitoring this if it's brought to our attention at all times. So at any place or time when a student's behavior has or is reasonably expected to have a direct or immediate impact on the orderly and efficient operation of schools or the safety of individuals in the school environment. So if there is a situation, any place or any time that deals with a cell phone or it deals with a laptop, even if it is not licensed by the school, we still have a responsibility to take action if it's impacting school, and if it's being brought to your attention, like Dr. Lamb said, then it's impacting school in some way. So last thing I'm going to say tonight about staff, and this was a battle that made me very unpopular as a principal, but I monitored cell phone use. And you're going to become leaders, and you're going to work with other principals who don't monitor it. And I hope that each one of you, when you become principals, do monitor it, because if your staff is on their cell phones, guess what they're not watching? Anybody want to take a guess? They're not watching their kids. Okay, and I'm telling you, I shared with you all I think 2 weeks ago. I am in the middle of a lawsuit because a teacher was on her cell phone for 30 seconds. 30 seconds. And the school is being sued because of negligence. That's all it takes. And so when you become
I don't mean to interrupt. So in the case that they ask us to have remind, and they're constantly texting us about changes and dispersals and who's not coming in, and they're saying, keep your cell phone with you so that you can get did you get my remind text message? And we're having to do that. I mean, how does that play into what you're saying?
So your ultimate priority is watching your students. But if you're in a place where you can, and you're answering text messages, so I did not, as a principal, I did not have that expectation. If I needed to get in touch with you, we had school walkies. Every classroom had a walkie. We had the all-call system. I would go and find the person. I didn't like setting that precedent that I wanted teachers on their cell phones. So if I say, no, we're not texting during the school day, I'm certainly not going to then pull out my cell phone and text. That was my rule as a principal, because there are so many different ways around it. As far as talking to parents, I think that should be delegated to your planning time, or to after the bell rings or before the bell rings. Unless it's an absolute emergency. But if it's that big of an emergency, then the office could be involved in helping you communicate with your parents. I'm just telling you that doesn't matter if in the court of law, if you are asked, were you distracted or were you on your cell phone and not watching the students? And you say, well, I was on my cell phone, but I was texting my principal. Still, guess what you were not doing? You weren't watching your kids. So even if you know that your principal is texting you, or you need to contact a parent, I would make sure that I would go ask another teacher, or I would, watch my kids while I quickly send this text or make this phone call. But I would not leave them unattended or not being watched, because that's when the problems happen.
So I'm reading Michelle's comment that their walkie-talkies are so unreliable, the principal is requiring them to carry their cell phones at all times. How does that play into being protected in the situation where you may find yourself a 30-second lawsuit in court trying to defend your actions? And I hear you, we're watching the kids, but at the same time, text message pops up, principal or whoever admin is wanting you to do something. How do we protect ourselves?
It's not important enough. If they don't come and get you in person, it's not important enough for it not to have to wait till the time when you're not supervising kids. That's what the law will tell you. I'm giving you the legal opinion. I'm giving you the attorney opinion right now, is that if it's so important that it needs to be dealt with immediately, they can send somebody down to your room. That's what we've done forever. Then they've got runners, they've got the SRO, they've got deans, they've got plenty of people. If it's important that we have to have your immediate attention, we'll send somebody. But if you're working on your phone, wait till the time that you're not in direct, your lunch, your planning between classes, when you're not in direct supervision of kids. And if they say, well, why didn't you get back? Well, if it was that important, you should have sent somebody. You could walk, you could walk down to my room as well. I mean, that's what you're going to have to say to people, because otherwise, when you go to court, you can't say, well, my principal don't like this. They don't care in court what your principal likes. They do not care what your principal likes in court. Did you adequately supervise these kids? Were you distracted? Your responsibility was to them. And that it was inconvenient that somebody couldn't walk down there is not your problem. You got to make sure that you understand that. But we want you to learn from the administrative perspective. Don't you be the horse's ass that does that expects people to answer your text every few minutes and don't be texting your teachers while they're working. If it's that important, walk down and see them. You know, I can't fix all the problems of all the stupid administrators. I just don't want you to be one of them. Don't join their ranks. And a lot of times, the best training you're going to get is when you watch people do it badly. You learn more from bad ones than sometimes you do from good ones in terms of don't do dumb stuff like that. And that's just dumb, pulling teachers away from their supervision. And then get mad when you get sued. Well, that's your fault. That's just self-inflicted dumbassery. That wasn't accidental or incidental. You did that to yourself. And so that's what we're talking about is learn to do it the right way. And if it's being done the wrong way in your school, write it down so you'll remember it so you won't do that when it's your turn to be in charge.
And this is the last thing I'll say is that, every county is different, every district is different. So go and read these acceptable use policies, because you can see here in Lincoln County, our board recently decided to leave it up to the school principal on how those technology devices could be used throughout the school day. So that's where it's a little bit different. So me as a principal, I said, absolutely not. We're not doing it at all. They can have them, but students can have them, but we're not using them. Teachers can have them, but and they can be, obviously the teachers could be on, but they should only be doing them when they do not have direct supervision of students. And listen, this is what I had to do to make, I even as serious as I was with that, look at where I am. I'm still dealing with a lawsuit, but I checked in on our playgrounds. I was an elementary principal. I wanted to see, so I looked at our cameras. I had the monitors in my office. And if I saw a teacher on their cell phone, I would walk out to the playground and say, what are you doing? And I would always, Sandra, I'm glad you brought that up, because I would always get the point back, well, I'm texting a parent. Well, not now, because over there, you've got a kid throwing rocks at another one that you didn't, so just again, it's most boards are probably going to leave it up to the principal to make those specific rules. And if you're like me, I always erred on the side of caution, and there is no good in looking at a cell phone over looking at your kids, or having a kid being able to access their cell phone at any time throughout the school day. Anyway, that was my perspective. So,
and that's the correct perspective to have. Is that it's going to be left up to you as a principal. You got to make the right decision rather than the easy decision. Let me share my screen. Thank you, our resident expert. It's so good to have people who do this every day. Let me share my screen, and I'm gonna review quickly what I have for you, and show you how smart I am. All right, so let me get some of this out of here. We'll do that next time. All right, under our week 6 for tonight. So what we have is Dr. Sain's presentation is already here, ready for you. You can go over it. This link is the cyberbullying. This goes to the laws. All those different slides had a law on it. I have them all. This website puts them all for you right there in one place, and you can read through them all at one time if you'd like to do that. But it has all that stuff. And then here is a bullying prevention PowerPoint. Dr. alluded to this, but every year, every school has to have a bullying prevention plan. This talks all about it. It also has some really good tips on what you should do, what your plan should consist of. But yes, you'll have to have a bullying prevention plan at your school every year. And right here are some of the things. What can schools do to stop bullying? These are things that should be addressed in your plan. So this is a really good one that will help you develop that plan. And then last but not least, how smart I am. I have this presentation for you. Now, we've talked about, and Dr. Sain has highlighted for you, we don't want kids to kill themselves. And that's one of the things that's really happening a lot now. But my argument that's tangential to that is this. those acts of crime and violence, those 9 acts of violence, robbery with a weapon, assault with a weapon, assault with serious injury, rape, indecent exposure, indecent liberties, sexual assault, sexual offense, assault again with weapon and assault with injury. Those 9 count against your persistently dangerous total. All right, now, so the notion of antecedent behaviors is the little things become the big things. And there are 4 factors that really heavily contribute to those bad things that count against you happening on your campus. Want to take a guess? Now, here's the smart part. 14 years ago, I hired a criminologist and we did a 2-year exhaustive study of the data from Charlotte-Mecklenburg because we were having a real problem with persistently dangerous incidents happening in our schools. We had a number of schools that went on the watch list. We had a couple that had to, that parents got to opt to go to a different school, and that was a disaster. They went from Coolwood to J.M. Robinson, and you could imagine. No, they went from not Coolwood. What's the one over off the plaza? Cochran. They went from Cochran to J.M. Robinson. If you know anything about Charlotte, imagine that 2-hour bus ride each way each day. Terrible. And then we had to reconstitute a couple of schools, had to let the principal and the administrative staff and the teachers. And so we were having a real trouble with that. So I did a 2-year study. I hired a criminologist to figure out why we were having all these bad incidents. What we found is the little stuff becomes the big stuff. And so in 2011, I was the keynote at the big conference, the statewide conference at Curry in Greensboro at the Safe Schools, Safe Living, Helpful, the big one, the one big one every year. I was the keynote there, and I brought this to them. This was 12 years ago this spring, by the way. And I said, these are the things that are going to cause you to have all these bad behaviors happening, these violent behaviors, persistently dangerous in your school. Let's see what I said 12 years ago. Here are the 4 things that are going to get you. I said this 12 years ago. That's the 4 things that'll get you, folks, right there. Sexual harassment, all your sexual stuff leads to all those sexual offenses. Cyberbullying, bullying. This is 12 years ago, folks, before TikTok, before a lot of the stuff that you see now, but we already knew. Sexting, using electronic devices to convey inappropriate images, which is another form of bullying, and then gang activity. Those are the things that cause your biggest problems in school. Those are the little things that left unchecked, undealt with, finding ways not to deal with them, that become the big things, that become those violent things that happen in your building. That's them right there. And this is what happens as a result. This is quite an extensive presentation. These are the things that happen as a result: homicide, suicide, death in school. We just call it death now. Assault resulting in serious injury, assault weapon, rape, sexual offense, sexual assault, kidnapping, robbery with a dangerous weapon, and indecent liberties with a minor. So you ignore these things at your own peril. I identified 12 years ago, that this was a coming problem. It was already a problem in Charlotte. We were a little further advanced. And you can't believe on the feedback section, when you get up and do a presentation like that, you get feedback. You can't believe how many folks said to the extent, well, that's Charlotte. That won't ever happen in our small community. I'm like, that'll make people that stupid wear a sign and a helmet. Like it mattered where you lived when in cyber media, that it mattered. I mean, you can go to the North Pole now and somebody's got a cell phone. What are you talking about? That won't happen in our community. Well, of course it will. Of course it will. And so you've got to understand that, folks, that it's going to happen in your community. The internet is the genie out of the bottle. All these different platforms, all the kids can find a way to get on that stuff. I don't care what you do. You better find a way to deal with it, because if you don't, the big things are coming your way. And you know what happens 2 years in a row? You have too many of those violent incidents on your campus. You're unemployed, and you're not employable ever again as a school administrator. I hope you got a second trade like welding or HVAC, because you're never going to be in the school business. if you get let go because violent things were happening on your campus. You better know that we're talking, nobody's trying to scare you. We're talking real world here. And you know how prevalent social media is. You can either deal with it, or you can ignore it to your own peril. That's the notion. Dr. Singh, thank you again tonight. It means so much to have a person in the field here with us that deals with this every day. Next week is our case study. Make sure you understand Leandro. I'm going to talk about that. I know we've gone past our time, but I'm going to spend 1 minute on Leandro. Leandro is a national case that was centered in North Carolina on school funding. Leandro said that that if you read that Duke law, what was held under case study 1, the state does not have to equalize money, and you can't move federal, state, or local money around. It has to follow the kids. And so understanding that the superintendent wants to move money around, I'll go ahead and give you the secret. It's illegal. It doesn't matter that it's a good thing to want to do, but you got to tell me legally why that he can't do that. I'll go ahead and give you kind of the answer in the back of the book. What he wants to do is illegal, but why is it illegal? That's what we want to focus on next week. Thank you as always for joining us. Sorry we ran a little bit over tonight, but I'd stay with you all night and talk about this kind of stuff. But this is the important stuff, folks. And so again, thanks to Dr. Singh. Thank you all for being with us. Keep those assignments and evidence narratives coming in. I love reading them. I'll see you next week. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.